Ship collision is one of the many accidents that happen in the maritime industry. In most cases, it is caused by human error and incompetence and the lack of knowledge to the use of the navigational instruments that are provided on board ships. Just like any other shipboard incidents, there are certain procedures that needs to be taken in order to go through the situation successfully. And in the case of ship collision, there are 10 steps or actions that needs to be taken. So in the event of collision, the very first thing that we need is to inform the master and the engine room. If the master is not present on the bridge during the situation, we need to inform him or her about the collision. We also need to inform the engine room to stop the engines immediately to prevent causing further damage on both ships during the collision. If we are the officer of the watch and we are unsure on what to do during that situation, we need to call the master for guidance, because with his knowledge, skills, and expertise that he has gained throughout the years in this profession, he is able to make quick decisions that'll allow us to save lives more efficiently, prevent further damage to the ship, and prevent the possibility of causing other problems such as pollution that'll cause damage to the marine environment. The second thing that we need to do is to immediately send distress signals. Since we're in a collision, we are involved in a situation wherein it poses a risk to the safety of both the ships. So clearly in that situation, we need assistance from other ships and from the nearest shore. So we can send distress signals by sending designated and undesignated distress messages through the VHF, the MFHF, or SAT-C, and other available means available on board ships. But this is depending on the location or the sea area where the collision happened and the amount of time that we have during that situation. If we have enough time, we should inform the company about the situation in order for them to be informed that we are involved in a collision. Also, we need to inform the nearest shore facility in order for them to provide assistance that would help us to get through that situation. The third thing that we need to do is to record important data. It is protocol, which means it is one of the most basic things that we need to do in every situation, emergency situations on board ships. So in this situation, we need to record the time of the collision, where it happened, when it happened, and who are the involved vessels in the collision. So this involves the name of the vessel and its IMO number. And in this situation, instead of arguing with the other vessel on who's to blame because of the collision, we need to record the important data that will be used for the investigation that'll happen afterwards, after the collision has been addressed. Also, in this situation, we need to leave the VHF channel 16 unoccupied in order for us to get the information regarding the assistance that we requested earlier, and in order for us to request help if needed. In addition, since we're already recording important information involving the collision, we need to take photographs for documentation purposes. With these photos, these can be used for the investigation that'll happen afterwards, the collision. The next thing that we need to do is to sound the alarms. Just like any other shipboard emergency, we need to inform the crew of the situation. So the most efficient way to do it is by sounding the alarms. So in the event of a collision, we need to sound the general emergency alarm to inform the crew that we are involved in an emergency situation, which is collision. But by sounding this alarm, we need to make sure that this is not interpreted as abandoning the ship, but rather as a precaution that we are involved in a collision. After sounding the emergency alarm, or the general emergency alarm, we need to gather at the muster station, and there we should take attendance to know if there is a missing person who is unaware of the situation. In that point, if someone is missing, we should send a responsible crew or officer to fetch that person or find that person and bring that person to the muster station. During that situation, responsible crew must make all arrangements and precautions in case that we are going to abandon the ships. So we should do this by lowering the lifeboats and by informing and by instructing the crew on what to do during that situation. In addition, if the collision damage is just minimal, we need to make sure that the engine room is not left unattended, because we need to wait for further instructions on what to do during that collision incident. Also, responsible crews and officers must be prepared with the various life-saving appliances such as life jackets, immersion suits, and other survival instruments that we need when abandoning the ship or in case that there is another emergency that will arise during that situation. The fifth thing that we need to do in the event of a collision is to assess the damage. On board ships, there's this thing called countermeasures, which is done after determining the extent of the damage or the impact to the ship after the collision. So in order to determine this extent of the damage or the percentage, we need to do an assessment, and this is done by a responsible officer by inquiring the percentage of the damage to the location or to the point impacted during the ship collision. After knowing the extent of the damage, we would be able to know what to do during that situation. And if we know the extent of the damage already, we need to inform the master of the situation of the ship or the condition of the location where the ship has collided with another in order for us to know what to do during that situation. The next thing we need to do is to take the soundings. So it is to be expected that at some point after the impact of the collision, there would be a damage to some of the tanks on board ships. So in order for us to determine whether there are damages or cracks or holes on the tanks, we need to take the soundings. And in that situation, we're going to take soundings on the ballast tanks, the freshwater tanks, and wing tanks. If there is a change on the sounding after taking the assessment, that is an indication that there is a hole or a crack on the tank, which poses a risk to the safety of the ship. So after knowing that situation or that crack or that information, we need to take the countermeasures in order for us to prevent the ship to be further damaged. And that is done by monitoring the tanks or the damages closely and by computing or calculating rather the rate of increase or decrease in water in the tanks. And taking all the necessary sounding on the ships after the collision, the next thing that we should do as a responsible officer is to take immediate action in case of damage. Since we're now well aware of the situation and the condition of the ship after the collision, we should do the countermeasures that needs to be taken in order to prevent further damage to the ship that endangers the life of the crew, the cargo, and that surrounds it. By doing these countermeasures and immediate action, we are not only preventing further damage to the ship, but we're also preventing the possibility of losing the ship in the process, or in this situation, which is ship collision. And by doing so also, we could be able to avoid situations that may cause harm to the marine environment. So the next thing that we should do is to check for oil spills. Oil spills is one of the most common occurrences after a ship collision. Because during a ship collision, there is a possibility that the fuel tanks may be damaged due to the impact of the collision to the ship. So in that case, if the fuel tanks are damaged on the ships, there is a possibility that there's going to be an oil spill. So in that event, as a responsible officer, we should act according to the SOPEP, or the Shipboard Oil Pollution Emergency Plan, which teach us the countermeasures or the procedures that needs to be taken in order to go through the situation, which is oil pollution. The next thing that we should do is to reach the nearest port if possible. After taking all the necessary assessments and taking all the immediate actions to the damages caused by collision, if we've gone to the conclusion that the ship is still able to navigate the waters without endangering those around it and the marine environment, then the master can decide to bring the ship to the nearest port. There, in that port, the damages caused by the collision could be repaired by the professionals, making the ship seaworthy again and able to navigate the waters in no time. Lastly, abandon the ship only if everything else fails. As a responsible officer, we should know the procedures and the countermeasures are taken in order for us to prevent further damage to the ship, thus also preventing the possibility of losing the ship. After taking all the necessary assessments, necessary soundings, necessary actions or countermeasures to prevent such damage, and we still have arrived to the situation where we are going to lose the ship, we need to abandon the ship on that situation. We are not in control of everything on board ships. Although we've done necessary actions or solutions to prevent it from worsening, there still are possibilities or things that may go out of hand despite us being very strict in monitoring those situations. So in a situation where everything else fails and we have nothing to do, the last thing that we can resort to in order for us to save our lives and prioritize our safety as seafarers, we need to abandon the vessel. After the master has decided to abandon the ships immediately during that situation, we responsible officers should follow his or her instruction immediately and waste no time in thinking about other things, but